George, you prefer that? Oh. You got one more. Atabidehi Anga Mano Nuku Vaya Shakir Atma Vidya Visharado Nripatim Sadhu Prishtaha. Okay. Atabi Ata Atabide Yangamano Nukulam Prabhashase Bhagavata Pradhanaha Yad Ahavaya Shakir Atma Vidya Visharado Nipatim Sadhu Prishtaha Atabide Yangamano Nukulam Prabhashase Bhagavata Pradhanaha Yad Ahavaya Shakir Atma Vidya Visarado Nipatim Sadhu Prishtaha Atabhide Yangamano Nukulam Prabhashase Bhagavata Pradhanaha Yad Ahavaya Shakir Atma Vidya Visharado Nipatim Sadhu Prishtaha Atabhide Yangamano Nukulam
Prabhashase Bhagavata Pradhanaha Yadaha Vayyasakiratma Vidya Visharado Nripatim Sadhu Prishtaha Athabide Yangamano Nukulam Prabhashase Bhagavata Pradhanaha Yadaha Vayyasakiratma Vidya Visharado Nripatim Sadhu Prishtaha.
Much of these? Okay. All right. Babi Yangamano Nukulam
Prabhashase Bhagavata Pradhanaha Yadaha Vayyasakiratma Vidya Visharado Nripatim Sadhu Prishtaha.
Okay. Ata, therefore, Abidehi, please explain. Anga, O Sutta Goswami. Manaha, mind. Anukulam, favorable to our mentality. Prabhashase, sorry, you do speak. Bhagavata, the great devotee. Pradhanaha, the chief. Yat aha, what he spoke. Vayashakihi, Shukadev Goswami. Atma Vidya, transcendental knowledge. Visaradaha,
Visharadaha,
expert,
expert,
Nripatim,
Nripatim,
unto the king,
unto the king,
Sadhu,
Sadhu,
very good,
very good,
Prishtaha,
Prishtaha,
sorry, being asked.
yes.
Okay. Translation and purport by Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. O Sutta Goswami, your words are pleasing to our minds. Therefore, please therefore explain this to us as it was spoken by the great devotee Sukadeva Goswami, who is very expert in transcendental knowledge and who spoke to Maharaj Parikshit upon being asked. Knowledge explained by the previous Acharya, like Sukadeva Goswami, and followed by the next, like Sutta Goswami, is always powerful transcendental knowledge, and is therefore penetrating and useful to all submissive students. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the second canto, third chapter of Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled Pure Devotional Service, the Change in Heart. Om Agana Timanandasya Gananjanjana Salakaya Chakshorum Nitam Yena Tashmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapanantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnava Navamscha Shri Rupam Sagaratam Sagara Raganaptam Mitam Tam Chajivam Savadvaitam Savadvaitam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalitam Shri Vishakam Mitam Scha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimante Bhakti Vikas Swami Niti Namane Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimante Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunivadi Paskata Dasatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. O Sutta Goswami, your words are pleasing to our minds. Please therefore explain this to us as it was spoken by the great devotee Sukadeva Goswami, who is very expert in transcendental knowledge and who spoke to Maharaj Parikshit upon being asked. So, let me pull up one thing here. Okay. So this is the concluding verse of this chapter. So this is also the conclusion of, I guess, what was this name? Shonaka Rishi, I believe. So Shonaka Rishi, in these past series of verses, has been imploring Sutta Goswami to speak more about the topics of Bhagavatam, and Sutta Goswami will continue to speak in the next chapter, which is called the process of creation. So this second canto, I believe it's entitled Secondary Creation. So there's the creation of the material world, which Vishnu and his different energies mostly, what they pretty much take care of. And then there's a secondary creation, which Vishnu takes care of indirectly through Brahma, because Brahma gets his ability to create from Vishnu. So the chapters to come will speak a little bit about that. So this specific chapter is described as pure devotional service, the change in heart. So the beginning of the chapter was talking about you worship this demigod, you worship that demigod, whatever. You do all these different things and you get these results. And then it came to the conclusion. It was this Kama Sarva Kama Va Moksha Kama Udaridihi Trivina Bhakti Yogena Yajita Purusham Param. That pretty much, like, if you want liberation, if you want these material things, or you don't want anything at all, you should worship Krishna. So the understanding of that verse isn't that if you want your material things, then worship Krishna, and then you get your material things, and then just worship Krishna for material things. The understanding is that if you have material desires and you worship Krishna, then they should go away if you follow the prescribed process properly, and you're also getting the transcendental knowledge, because transcendental knowledge. I mean, so many things are discussed there. Just like these previous verses were being mentioned, that if that if you're not that if you're not that the different limbs of the body were given compared to like animals and just useless things, like the trees are standing, and the bellows of the blacksmith are breathing, and ears are like you have ears like a snake. So it's like all these things, they seem, eyes like the plumes of a peacock. So these things, I don't know. I mean, the ears of a snake don't really seem so nice. But the understanding is that without hearing of Krishna or engaging in the process of devotional service, your whole body is just a show. Is a decoration of a dead body, as Prabhupada would say often. Is the animal life. So so when one gets the knowledge, then he understands properly what the situation is. So the main thing is that there has to be some change in the individual. There has to be, as the title explains, there has to be a change of heart. So in the material world, one of the main problems is that the living entity is conditioned. The soul is not in a sense contaminated, but it's covered over. It's like probably to give the example of a cloud. The cloud is always, the sun is always shining, but it seems like for some time temporarily that a cloud comes over and it looks like how it does now, like, kind of like, well, it's a little muggy, it's not so bad. But it's not, the sun isn't shining in its full splendor. It looks actually worse over here than it does over here. But anyways, there's a relative nature. So the position of the living entity is that he's pure, Nitya Siddha Krishna Das, that he's not contaminated by lust, anger, greed, all these different things. And in the 11th canto of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it's mentioned that I'm paraphrasing, but that liberation isn't that. I'm trying to think of exactly how to word it. But for the living entity, because the living entity is eternally, the living entity is eternal and is eternally spiritual, that liberation in and of itself, I'd have to pull it up anyways, I'm not going to say it probably correctly. But the idea is that liberation, even that is also not factual, because the living entity is already liberated, eternal in the eternal sense of speaking, just like waking up from a dream. So the pure spirit soul is eternally a servant of Krishna. And so anyways, so the problem is that the heart is contaminated. And so coming to the material world, the living entity becomes corrupted from associating with the material nature, and then takes on different material bodies. And there's the verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which is Karanam Guna Sango Sat Sarasat Yoni Janmasu. So the living entity is associating with material nature, and then taking different births, good and bad, amongst various species. So the process of Krishna consciousness is meant to change the mentality of the living entity and gradually wean him off the intoxication of material nature. And so one of the things is that the basic problem of the living entity is that he's looking at the material world and thinking, well, I can enjoy this and I can enjoy that. The Bhagavad Gita explains, is that famous verse, Dayato Vishayan Pumsam Sangas Teshu Pajayate Sangat Chandayate Kama Kama Krodha Vijayate. So this verse explains that that when the living entity is contemplating on something that's attracting its sense objects, then the attachment develops, or then attachment, lust, and then anger comes. But specifically this attachment, because if the living entity, so the idea is that the living entity, he's thinking, he's contemplating, and he's looking at things, thinking of how to enjoy this, how to enjoy that, based on the platform of sense gratification. And so on that platform, the living entity becomes attached to whatever it is. I mean, he can become attached to a position, become attached to a house, become attached to obtaining something in the future. The attachment builds, but the attachment is based on an impure state of consciousness, because I'll pull it up here. But in the previous to these verses in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna a couple questions. And so I'll just skim through some of that. But let's see here. So Arjuna asked Krishna, before Krishna explains these things, he asks him pretty much, so how can you tell, like, what is the, how do you tell someone who's in transcendence, who's Krishna conscious? What's their activities? What does he says? What does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? How does he walk? So that's a big topic. But then there's some understanding that someone who's spiritual or Krishna conscious, they behave in a certain way. So Krishna gives some different things that that he acts like this, he thinks like this. He gives some understanding of how to understand someone who's transcendental. He's not, what is this here? That he's able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as a tortoise withdraws its limbs from within the shell. It's firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. So right before that verse, where Krishna talks about, by this verse specifically, about focusing on the object of the senses. So one of the things that Krishna explains is that this is text, what is this? Yeah, this is text 61. So I'll just chant that Sanskrit. So he says, Tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha vasehi yasyendriyani tasya pragna pratishtita. So Krishna, the translation is, one who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. And then Prabhupada explains about how that this is the highest conception of yoga and Krishna consciousness that is explained in this verse. So the idea is that the consciousness is fixed on Krishna. And so in that sense, the senses are restrained because one is in Krishna consciousness. And so Prabhupada gives the example in other places, but just how you have a snake, a venomous snake, its teeth are removed, so then the snake is not in danger to anybody, though it's a snake. So similarly, when one is engaged in the process of Krishna consciousness, the venom-like teeth of the senses are removed from one that's firmly situated. And so then at that point, when one is looking at material nature or whatever, and then contemplating, because it's dhyata, it's meditation. So one is meditating on different objects in the material world. Because he's situated in Krishna consciousness, he's not thinking of how can I exploit them for my own sense gratification, this vishaya. But he's thinking of how can I take these things and engage them in Krishna service. So the contemplation and all those things continue. But the platform by which one is contemplating on is completely changed. So this is the difference between those verses. And then also, too, this is the understanding, this is the change in the heart of devotional service, which is being spoken of in this chapter. I'll pull up another verse here. This is a similar verse also. This is from the 11th canto, chapter 14, text 27. And it's more or less the same, but it's kind of like a combination of both those verses. So this verse is Vishayan dayataschittam viyash yeshu vishishjate mam anus marantaschittam mamyeva praviliyate. So the translation of this is, the mind of one meditating upon the objects of sense gratification is certainly entangled in such objects. But if one constantly remembers me, then the mind is absorbed in me. So this here is also mentioned, that the meditating, so dhyataha, so one whose consciousness is completely absorbed in sense gratification. But then the inverse of that is mentioned, that one who's constantly absorbed, anusmarata, and remembering Krishna. So it's a big topic, but I won't really get so much into that. So the idea is that by the process of devotional service, that's the method of destroying the relationship between because the mind. So then the four Kumaras bring up. This is one of my favorite verses, actually, that part in the Bhagavatam. I was going to read from it, but anyways, that's a whole, I don't want to go all in that direction. But they pretty much ask that the Lord Brahma, living entity, that he's in the material world, and he's suffering because of the senses, and it's pulling him, but he also has the mind, which is corrupted. So then how do you break off the relationship with that? Because the senses are, they want to enjoy in a particular way, but then also the mind is contemplating that. So there's relationship, anonya, which is the Sanskrit for that. And so so anyways, Lord Brahma is not able to break that or understand that, and he gets confused. And then Hamsa Avatar comes and explains a series of verses. So the conclusion with Hamsa ultimately is that one has to engage in the process of devotional service of sadhana bhakti, and that breaks the relationship, the material contamination from the mind and the senses, and purifies them both. Because if you have impure mind and impure senses, and you can't come to the stage of transcendence, the cycle has to be broken. So the process of pure devotional service is the process that does that. And so these understandings, so this is what's being spoken, one of the aspects of being spoken of in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So so Sutta Goswami and Sukadev Goswami, they're speaking this understanding to the listeners of that, which is mainly Maharaj Parikshit and then the sages at Naimisharanya. So this is transcendental knowledge, and is very powerful, and is very transforming. And Srila Prabhupada ends this by saying it's useful to all submissive students. That's a whole other topic also, about to be a submissive student. But this is the understanding is that the living entity is whatever, in the material world and suffering in different ways, and has some different mental hang-ups about why it's not surrendered to Krishna. So there has to be the knowledge of the living entity's position and how to get from point A to point B has to be explained lucidly, so that there's some change in consciousness. Because by hearing the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam and by associating with devotees and engaging in the process of Krishna consciousness, there has to be some change. Not that things just stay the same. That sometimes they quote that verse: "Just stay where you are." Stani stita shruti katam tanuman manober. Just stay where you are, and just hear the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. Wherever you come in, you hear. You don't have to change immediately, but there should be some change in behavior and action and talk. Not that someone hears the message of Krishna consciousness and is a butcher, and then he remains a butcher, but now he's a Krishna conscious butcher. That's not the proper understanding. There has to be changes. So Srimad Bhagavatam is a couple of things, and it explains this also, that there are changes from hearing the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. These two particular verses, they're coming in chapters, in chapter 8. These are very nice verses, actually. I really like them. So the Sanskrit to that is Shunvatva Swadaya Nityam Grinathashashvachetisam Kalena Nati Dirgena Bhagavan Vishyate Hridi. And I'll just chant the next one also. Pravishta Karna Randrana Swanam Bhava Sarohuham Denoti Samalam Krishna Salilasya Yatha Sarat. So these translations are: persons who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter very seriously will have the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, manifested in their hearts within a short time. And then the next verse: the sound incarnation of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Soul, i.e. Srimad Bhagavatam, enters into the heart of a self-realized devotee, sits on the lotus flower of his loving relationship, and thus cleanses the dust of material association, such as lust, anger, and hankering. And thus it acts like autumnal rains upon pools of muddy water. Let me see something here real quick. I'm going to go in a different direction. Let me pull up the next verse. Oh, it's not in here. Anyways, we're going to read the next verse after that. So anyway, so these so two things these verses mention. So the first thing is that by regularly hearing and taking seriously Srimad Bhagavatam, so hearing and then also taking seriously means that we're reading the books of Srila Prabhupada, and we're hearing the classes from our spiritual master and devotees trying to repeat that message, and then we take that seriously. Not that we're just reading and then it goes in one ear and out the other, but that we're reading and we're also contemplating what it is that we've heard, what it is that we're at. It's one of the verses in the second canto, I believe, it says like introspective sages. so that we're also looking in ourselves also, and rolling this knowledge around in our heads and contemplating it and thinking about it and actually applying it. It's not, we have to hear, but we have to hear with attention. We can't just half hear Srimad-Bhagavatam and expect to become great Paramahamsas. If we half hear Srimad-Bhagavatam, then we'll half hear something else. We'll half hear Maya, we'll half hear this. We won't be attracted. The next verse explains that, so for one who is doing that, Krishna will manifest in the heart through the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam, and he'll sit there. And as a result of, and then from this nice hearing, material association, lust, anger, all these things disappear. And does anybody have the next verse, what the next verse is after that? I can maybe try to pull it up quick. 286, that's the one I want to see. I just read that. I have some, lost my thing.
Davatma Purusha Krishna Padamulam Namunchati Mukta Sarva Pariklesha Hanta Swasharanam Yatha.
What's the translation?
A pure devotee of the Lord whose heart has once been cleansed by the process of devotional service never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, for they fully satisfy him as a traveler satisfied at home after a
Okay.
troubled journey.
So that's, anyways, this is a completely side point. So that verse in particular, I mean, that's, of course, we can understand that in different ways. But the idea from one understanding of that verse is that the pure devotee is completely satisfied in the association of Krishna. So that connects to this verse also, just another angle of looking at it, that these great devotees, they've gone through that, it's described that Maharaj Parikshit, of course, that this is just pastime and like that. He's not, some conditioned soul that just is struggling, but he's enacting the pastime of dying, of leaving his body so that the Srimad-Bhagavatam can be spoken. So Maharaj Parikshit, in that sense, he's just from hearing that, he's already situated at the part where Krishna is manifest with sitting on the lotus of his heart, and he's relishing the messages and is completely happy just hearing that. So this word here, specifically, I was thinking this, anukula means favorable to our mentality. So what is that mentality actually? That mentality is that of a great devotee, of one who is absorbed constantly in Krishna consciousness. What is that verse that, I can't remember, but Prahlad Maharaj explains that that one has to smear the lotus feet of the pure devotee, the dust of the lotus feet of the devotee all over his body, and then that frees one of all material desires. So just the dust of the lotus feet of the devotees cleanses one's heart of all material desires. So those that are actually situated on the highest platform of Krishna consciousness, their mentality is simply that they Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Pada Sevanam. So they're all of their. And also, too, we have this verse by, by Maharaj Parikshit. I don't know the whole Sanskrit, but he explains that his words were engaged in speaking about Krishna and his devotees, and then walking to holy places, and massaging the devotees' bodies, and taking prasadam. All of his different senses were engaged, and he was worshiping the deity, seeing all these things. So all of his different senses were engaged in worshiping Krishna. Devotee's mind is completely engaged and absorbed in thinking about Krishna. So this is the favorable mentality that these devotees have. So then their minds are absorbed in Krishna. So then these things are very attractive to them, and they want to hear more and more about these things. So Srila Prabhupada, going back, so Srila Prabhupada explains in here on I only think it's one sentence, but so he explains in the first part of the sentence that knowledge explained by the previous acharya, like Sukadeva Goswami, and followed by the next, like Sutta Goswami, are always powerful, transcendental knowledge. So the understanding is that that we have to hear from the proper source, and these are points that we of course we've heard so many times and we know so many times, but it's always important to hear and know again and again a proper source, because a proper source in Krishna consciousness isn't necessarily someone that speaks very nicely and we like the class because whatever. There's some funny jokes, or the person who gives the class does a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? There's a lot of dramatic theatrics, and it's like a drama on the Bhagavatam stage. Because I remember one time one devotee gave a class, and pretty much he just told a whole Mahabharat class, which is okay, and it had nothing to do with the purport which we were reading. And so he just pretty much just told stories the whole class. And one devotee I was with was like, wow, that was a really amazing class. I want to take initiation from this person. And so the thing is, I mean, like that individual, I mean, not that that's a big thing, but that individual wasn't even a devotee in ISKCON. I don't even know if he was a guru, and he wasn't someone that was really in good standing anyways. But the whole criterion was that this person spoke very nicely, and I felt good after that. And he just told a whole bunch of stories. There was no talk of like surrender to Krishna or anything like that. So we have to hear from the proper sources. The message should be, there should be a change of heart. That's the whole point of this chapter. There should be some change in us. We should become more attached to the process of Krishna consciousness. We should give up our anarthas. Now that we've been hearing Srimad-Bhagavatam for 30, 40 years, and then we're still interested in, whatever, mundane karmi music or something like that. So proper sources means that they're speaking properly and they're acting properly. Sutta Goswami, I mean, there's no question here of are they acting properly or not properly. There's no discussion of that in Srimad-Bhagavatam. There's no question. It's understood that they're acting according to Shastra, and they have proper behavior, sadachar. And so they act properly and they speak properly. There's a correlation, which I'll get to in a minute. But there's a connection between what we're hearing, what we're thinking, and how we're acting. If you can only pretend for so long, if you're thinking something, but you're speaking something else, and you're acting a different way, there'll be a class of interest, and eventually it'll be exposed. So the pure devotees are thinking of Krishna. That's why Krishna was explaining in those verses that the devotee, he acts in a certain way, like that. So the point is that if we hear from the proper source, they're speaking properly, then there's a consequence of the knowledge that we're hearing. There's a reflection. And that reflects on our behavior and our life and our activities. Generally, when coming to Krishna consciousness, devotees, if they take it seriously, they explain that there was a big change from when they were not in Krishna consciousness and then coming to be in Krishna consciousness. One change is that, especially in the Western worlds, people are accustomed to sleeping very late. What to speak of just friends, even myself, practically staying up all night, whatever, going to sleep at like, I don't even know, like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and then getting up whenever. So but then coming into the association with devotees, that was changed. Instead of, going to bed at 3 o'clock, getting up at 3 o'clock. Anyways, I used to joke with my friend when I moved in the temple, because I would send him a text and he would say, "Oh, I'm just getting to bed and you're just getting up." So we would like laugh about that. So there's a change in one's sleeping and generally in what one eats, how one eats. I mean, how we were eating before Krishna consciousness. I mean, at least most of us, there was no question of offering what we would eat. It was, what are we going to offer? What is that? There's no conception at all that you should offer what you eat. It was just, you go to the store, you buy. If you paid for it, then you were sanctioned to eat it, because that was the price to pay. Now that it had whatever, what's the question? Even what the question of just eating, that there was sin involved in that. Meeting, it can be understood. People can understand that that's not good. But how is it sinful to just go eat a pack of blueberries or something? How is that sinful? Where's the sin behind that? Anyways, Krishna explains that food which is not offered and sacrificed to him, it just entangles one in the material world. So all these subtleties were not understood to us. So by hearing these different things, by one who is expert in spiritual knowledge, it's Atma Vidya Visaradaha. So that's like Sukadeva Goswami, like Sutta Goswami, like Srila Prabhupada, like the predecessors, acharyas, and like our spiritual master. They're expert in this transcendental knowledge, and they're speaking that. So then there's a change there. So there's consequences of that knowledge, of that information. On the other side of that, we're speaking of transcendental knowledge. So on the material sphere also, there was some discussion previously, but this I was thinking about this phrase, the opiate of the masses, which is famous by I believe Karl Marx. Huh? Yeah, yeah. So he famously said that, which is, the idea is that religion just makes people, the thing with religion is that people are suffering due to what his understanding was due to class inequality. And so they're suffering and they're poor, and then someone is rich, and then so whatever. Then they have all these philosophies why they justify their suffering. Um, he was completely atheistic, and he was a big demon. And so, anyways, I looked into his quote a little bit. And so, anyways, his pretty much the conclusion of Marxism philosophy is that, just in short, that the perfection of Marxism is that so there's no more division amongst the classes. So there's it's all whatever one class, which is not a Paramahamsa class because it's atheistic. So it's one class, and there's also there's different things. I'm just kind of simplifying it. So there's one class, and then the people are happy because there's no divisions, because then you can relate to everybody, which I don't know what that class is, because then there's a division between the law department and the medical department and the police department, and then the guy who does the trash and the guy who does electricity. There's still a division, and then of course with the contaminated heart, people are thinking they're better than everybody else because they're a doctor, and you have to be smart to be a doctor. You don't have to be so intelligent to pick up the trash. You have to be strong to do physical labor. You don't have to be so strong to do, whatever, to be a doctor. You have to have some type of mental resilience to be a doctor, to be a surgeon, to be cutting people open and seeing blood. You don't have to have so much resilience to take care of children, and to be a mother in that way. You have to have a big heart to be a mother and deal with children and work with them. You don't have to, if you're a big writer, you don't have to deal with. So there's a difference there in all those different ways. Anyways, you can go on about that. So there's differences amongst people. So anyways, his conception is that, knock all that out, perfect society, everybody's equal, everybody fits together, everybody's happy, and there's no religion, because religion's not, at that point, because society's perfect and the separation of classes has been abolished. There's one class. There's no religion. And so he was explaining that this is the perfection of society, is an atheistic society. And so his ideas, and then he wrote this famous book, The Communist Manifesto. So the point is that he had this particular type of philosophy and this conception of what he thought the world should be and how it should be and how people should be. And his ideas had consequences, grave consequences actually, because his philosophy attracted the heart of, was this Vladimir Lenin, who, I forget the history exactly of anyways, all the intricacies of Lenin, how he read that, and then how he organized some party to overthrow the Tsar in Russia and all those things. I forget all that. But anyways, Lenin somehow or other, he read that, and he was attracted to that, and then there's Lenin Marxism and all that. And so anyway, somehow or other during that, I forgot how Stalin got pulled into it. But Stalin previously, before that whole throwover, I believe he was like some type of post boy or something like that. He wasn't really anybody so big. But anyways, he worked with Lenin, and they overthrew the Tsar, and the revolution was successful. And there was somebody else there also, I forget. But anyways, Lenin had a heart attack and then had a stroke, and then he died, and then Stalin somehow or other took over. So the thing is that, Stalin began to, as a result, carry out this philosophy of Marxism with his own little twist to it. I haven't studied it so much in depthly, and I'm not going to. But the point is that the conclusion of that philosophy of this one class, of this atheistic thing, resulted in, I forget how many millions of people died. But maybe that's just the what's it called? What we're told in America, because, we don't like Russia and communism and all those things. But during the, what was that called? The Great Purge, which what Stalin was just killing his own people. Some millions and millions of people were killed. I forget the number. It was like 13 million people were killed in Russia during the rule of Stalin, pretty much on the basis of that the Marxism, his philosophy is correct, and it should be followed, and like this. So this system of thought gave birth to a big demon, to gave birth to Stalin. And that system of thought and philosophy laid the foundation for him to rule. Somehow that he weaseled his way into power. And so there's many other examples like that. We see that Hitler also had his ideology, and he wrote his book explaining, the superior race and like that, and that the Jewish people have to be exterminated, and people that aren't on par, that aren't, whatever. He incorrectly used some Vedic terms. And so he had his whole, it wasn't just, the thing is, it wasn't just one person that was really into this. It was thousands of people. There was groups of people that were into it, highly intellectual people. Hitler had his whole, he had his whole entourage, and he had different intellectuals like that, which can be understood. There was, anyways, I don't want to get so much into, the Holocaust and things, but the Holocaust was also a result of Hitler's ideology and the Nazism party's philosophy. Even too in America, which, people, I don't know, they may not like to see, but there's also this Manhattan Project, which was the race to construct the atomic bomb. So the idea and the philosophy behind that was that, we have to develop this bomb quicker than, the axis of evil, which was Italy, Japan, and Germany. The Mussolini, Hitler, and I forget who was in charge of Japan. So they created this weapon, and then they used it, and then so they used it twice, I believe. At Hiroshima, Nagasaki, was that it?
Hiroshima.
Yeah, but then there was two places, my understanding. Nagasaki, right? So two places they used the atomic bomb. And so, anyways, the history goes that they warned people they're going to drop an atomic bomb. But anyway, the point is that so many thousands of innocent people were killed, and then also to Vietnam, all these things. But so the core group of intellectuals got together, and then they created a monstrous weapon, which killed thousands of innocent people also. And also there was long-term problems to that. So the thing is that philosophy is that there's a result of philosophy. There's a result of hearing something. It shows in our behavior. It shows in our action. It shows how we treat people. So the thing is, so we want to hear the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam because we see the result of people who took seriously the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam. Around us also we see devotees that took that seriously and it made a change in their lives. We see the epitome of that also, of Srila Prabhupada, of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of great devotees who were absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And also there's devotees too. There's of course, there's Brajayanandis and Goshtiyanandis. But specifically, we see with Srila Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and those who took seriously the preaching message, that they epitomize this change of heart which is being spoken of, that they're, of course, expert in this transcendental knowledge. So they're speaking that. And they spoke revolutionary things. And they did revolutionary things also. And that's, the history is all there. We can all study and look into that. But Srila Prabhupada, for instance, coming to the Western world, that was revolutionary at the time. Coming and doing and preaching, and anyways, so many times we can say and so many times we can speak, and it never gets tiring. But him coming and preaching to the hippies, and then invoking the change of heart in them, and then inspiring them to go all around the world and preach Krishna consciousness, and deliver the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu far and wide, and also too, and then just, what aspects should we focus on? Just the, it's actually amazing. Especially in America, and this, when the Krishna consciousness was taking off, 75, 76, 77, that the devotees were able to get this skyscraper building in New York. The Prabhupada sitting at the top of it, looking over New York, and then they're coming down what is this? What is that? Fifth Avenue? Was that where that Rath Yatra was? Was it
Yeah.
Fifth? Coming down Fifth Avenue and with these huge carts and millions of people there are hearing the message of Krishna consciousness. Millions of books are being distributed. This this information is going out, this Atma Vidya, which is having an effect on people's hearts and changing people's mentalities from this atheistic conception that thinking that there is a reaction for there is results for my actions, that there's karma, that if I do something bad, that there's a result from that. Anyway, so many things can be said, but just that whole whatever the social ethos at that time in America, this devoid, vegetarianism. It's like crazy. It's like I think Sikhi Mahiti Prabhu was mentioning when he became a vegetarian, his mother took him to the doctor, and the doctor was trying to explain to him how being a vegetarian was not healthy. It wasn't proper. And also too, I remember growing up that propaganda was there, and it's probably still there. So just all those different elements, and then Prabhupada coming and giving this message of Srimad-Bhagavatam, having an effect on people's lives, changing people's lives. People, what to speak of just making a change, people so much so just giving up millions of dollars, just like Giriraj Maharaj. His father was offering him like millions of dollars, the top of this business. You just give up being a Hare Krishna and come home. And he was so, because for different reasons, but just being in the association of Srila Prabhupada and hearing the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam, that made an effect on his heart. Because otherwise, I mean, as sometimes we see in Krishna consciousness, people are hearing, they're very nice, but then at first opportunity, some material situation arises and they jump on it and they give up everything. So they really didn't take the subject matter seriously to heart. But he took that seriously to heart, and he wasn't lured by millions of dollars, which $1 million back in the 70s, that was a lot of money. We can't imagine. What that is. I mean, if you grew up in the 70s, you might have some understanding. But anyways, so the perfection of the Srimad, so there's the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. So the person Bhagavatam is exhibiting all the qualities and characteristics of what we read about in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So those are great devotees who are dedicating their lives to the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam. And so there's Dhruva Maharaj also, there's so many things. And then and then we see, like if we read, there's Vaikuntha and Gokula, all those things which are individuals who have taken the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam to heart, and that reflects in their behavior. And so also too, and then we may argue, anyways, I won't get so much into this, but then we say, well, then also too, that what about, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, so many people were killed and this and that, and the innocent people and things. But the thing is that fighting of Kurukshetra, which is anyways, what to say? This is the truth of the matter. That fight was based on the principles of Dharma. So if we actually take the message of Srimad-Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita to heart, and we understand the intricacies of Vaishnava tradition and the whole Vedic literature properly from an acharya, we understand that at certain times in society there has to be fighting, and that sometimes there is killing. But that killing, which is done on religious grounds, it doesn't bring one a lower birth. And all these understandings, it gives one a higher birth, and to fight on the platform of Dharma is actually glorious. So these different understandings were there. Not like nowadays, people just killing for what? Why are people killing? Because they want, anyways, different things, but fighting all these big wars, this and that, so that McDonald's can be established and the oil flow can be maintained. But there's McDonald's, and this is just full-scale slaughterhouse. So much suffering has to be done for that. Anyways, this is we won't go so much in that direction, but everything is explained properly in the books of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So this is the message that's being spoken by Sukadeva Goswami. This is what they're speaking of in this verse. So they want to hear this Atma Vidya. They want to hear this knowledge. So why do they want to hear this knowledge? They like to hear this knowledge. It's pleasing to them. So they're hearing this knowledge and they're speaking it. So what effect is it having actually? It just, it seems like Sukadeva Goswami is just speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, and Sudha Goswami is just speaking to Shonaka Rishi and the assembled sages at Namasharanya. So the thing is that this wisdom was recorded down, this philosophy. And Srila Prabhupada took that, took this information and spread it all over the world. I mean, it was there in India. A couple people, knew about it. Maybe a lot of people knew about it, but they didn't have the commentary and the proper understanding of it. But he took that around India and he spread it. So we should understand that. There's going to be a consequence, and I don't mean consequent in the sense of a bad thing, but consequence, just some result. There will be some result and there is a result already, but there will be a very big result and a very big, anyways, the word for that is revolution from the spreading of this Krishna consciousness and this Srimad-Bhagavatam and everything that Srila Prabhupada did. It's there in a small way, but it will come in a big way. And anyways, I'm reading one book by former Harikesh Maharaj. It's called Varnashram Manifesto. So in his book, anyways, he's breaking down the point of just about a big social change of Varnashram taking over society, and then critiquing how society is just garbage. That is, people are very intellectual, but what is that intellect used for? That people, they go and they create nonsense movies, and they try to think about how to create the perfect situation, but they themselves aren't perfect. Anyways, so Srila Prabhupada coming to the Western world and delivering the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and also everybody that was connected with that is a part of a great plan. Sudha Goswami, Sunaka Rishi, all these, they're all connected. But Srila Prabhupada specifically came and brought this message to the West. So there's this famous verse in the Bhagavatam, Tad vag visargo janata viplavo yasmin pratislokam abadyavatyapi namanya, let me hold it up, namanya nantasya yasho nitanti yat shadvanti gayanti grananti saravaha. So the translation of this verse is, on the other hand, that literature, which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, form, pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation, full of transcendental words directed towards bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. So specifically this is what the Krishna conscious movement is about. This is why we're stressing so much, distribute books and all these things, and to implement these Varnashram projects and to carry out the orders of Srila Prabhupada. It's not that we're just blindly following and it's just Srila Prabhupada said to do it, so we do it. That may be there to some degree, but we should understand why Srila Prabhupada wanted things done. Otherwise, if you don't understand why Srila Prabhupada wanted someone to live on the land simply without electricity and grow their own food, and you go and do that, it's going to be extremely difficult to do that day after day because it's not easy. It's much easier to just, to live in the city and to have your electricity and to have a washing machine. It's why wash clothes, why grow food, why listen to kirtan, why I feel just as Krishna conscious when I hear, some karmi music. Why do all these things? That's a whole other discussion in itself. Then we don't understand why we do. Then we move into the realm of sahajas, and then we say all type of crazy things, which I'll say some crazy things another time. But the point is that we have to take this message seriously to heart. We have to hear it from a proper source. We have to know what we're doing, why we're doing. And there will be some change and there'll be some effect. There'll be some effect in ourselves and there'll be some effect in society at large. So this is what this is about. So this is what this change in the heart of devotional service, a change on the micro level and then a change on the macro level. And so these great devotees, they're expert in explaining that. They know all these different things. And so anyways, they're relishing this message of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So they're relishing it and they're loving it. But society is impious and they have jaundice, as Srila Prabhupada would explain in Nectar of Devotion, or Instruction. So they don't like hearing this message. It's like bitter, whatever. It's bitter, it's nasty, it's like, I don't know. It's like medicine. Just growing up sometimes, I'd have to drink medicine and then there's Robitussin and these things. So it tastes disgusting. And it's supposed to make you feel better, but it really doesn't. It just tastes nasty. So the message of Krishna consciousness may be disgusting and may be unpalatable for most of the population. But we have to speak this message, and this message is for everybody. For what is this verse? Atmarama chimuneo niyagranta aprukrame korvanta haitakim bhaktim ita bhuta gunoharihi. So Srimad Bhagavatam is for those on the topmost liberated platform, and also for those who are on the bottommost platform, suffering in the material world. So those who are on the completely transcendental platform, they'll be like Sonaka Rishi and the sages here. They'll be loving it and want to be hearing more and more. But those who aren't on the transcendental platform, they'll be saying, stop it. Or they'll stand up in class and make an objection. How can you say this? Caste system, all these things. They'll object to it. Or how can you say this? And Prabhupada says this is in his books. This is not according to, I don't know all the terminology, but according to modern thought, this is improper, this is sexist, this is that. This is improper. This is all these things. These objections they'll say. They'll put so many objections to this actually. So, but a revolution is understood that it's an overthrowing of multiple things actually. Generally, people understand a revolution is just overthrowing people out of power. But an actual revolution is not just throwing people out of power, but it's a complete change in the function of the system and the way of thought about how people behave on a day-to-day basis and how they're managed. So Srila Prabhupada wanted there to be an overthrowing of a revolution, of throwing out this improper mundane thought and to be replaced with proper Krishna consciousness, where people who are learned in Shastra are advising people who are in leadership positions about how to rule properly, which means there's a consideration of karma, of what should be done, what not should be done on the basis of Shastra. So anyways, there's a couple of thoughts about this verse here. I'll just stop now if there's any questions or comments about anything.
So, I wanted to ask, we understand that occupations that are favorable to Krishna consciousness. Traditionally, the understanding is whichever is according to Varnashram Dharma, right? Like you have Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and you accept one of these occupations are stated in Shastra, what those occupations are, and that's pretty much it. Anything that's outside this is considered as vikarma, and traditionally would not be dovetailed in Krishna service. Now, however, the world is not in that situation. Devotees themselves do not find themselves in such a situation. So, because this point about you being a butcher, you can't be a Krishna conscious butcher, but seems like you can be a Krishna conscious IT worker or a Krishna conscious news reporter. But I'm just saying these are generally all these professions are also out of the traditional scope of Varnashram Dharma. So is there any verse or is there any guideline how one may know which particular occupation in the current world, just for the sake of survival, can be considered as being favorable towards Krishna consciousness and which isn't?
Yeah. So, kind of like what I understood is that, you may not specifically find things like that in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, for instance, because it's, generally the context of Srimad-Bhagavatam is
within the Varnashram context.
Yeah, which is we're living in a society which is out of the Varnashram concept. So with that, in that situation, it's a general thing, but it's required to speak about it with people who are learned in Shastra and they can see. Because, for instance, there are teaching, teachers and things like that. Like you say, a news reporter, it's that's something new and things, and then this other stuff.
There's so many things that are new.
There's a lot of things.
There's an Uber driver.
Yeah.
It's kind of like there. I guess,
Yeah. One just has to kind of with the help of the guidance of some seniors, just has to kind of look at what one's getting into and just make sure that that's not like something that's like overtly sinful. Like I know one person was, they wanted to work, they were working in a convenience store, and they were like a devotee, but I was saying like, well, I was saying we're working in a convenience store, but I mean like we're selling meat and like all these things, and it's like you don't really have to like, well, first of all, I didn't have to do that, and second off, it wasn't the best position. So as far as possible, like especially, I mean, it's one thing like, so someone may be a butcher and come to Krishna consciousness, and then that has to be like seen also, because just to quit outright may not be the best thing if one has a family to maintain. But the thing is that one should be like looking for a better situation, because there is that example of Prabhupada that guy, I think he was selling liquor or something, or meat, or I forget.
Meat, Fiji.
Yeah, but then he, over some time, he kind of like wound that down and like changed that. So just one has to like speak with the devotees and figure out like what is the best situation to like, or occupation. And different devotees have also like different ideas of like how to do that now. So then there's, I guess you just have to like get like personal experience with somebody that's done that. So.
Yeah, I was kind of curious if there was any guideline, but I mean, because we have a general sense of it, but is there a guideline, something? And again, this is also another philosophical speculation I have about a guideline, but I can't reference it to anything. My understanding is in devotees, we will avoid occupations that directly deal with breaking the four regulated principles.
Yeah.
And that anything else is kind of like,
Yeah.
you just, well, that seems to be kind of like, okay, you're a prostitute, then you stop prostitution.
Yeah.
Of course, like you're saying, you have to figure out how to stop it. May not be possible immediately, but that's what you're going to have to do. And then, I mean, like this, so liquor and meat and gambling. But then beyond that, I think it's all just based upon how much one is able to practice Krishna consciousness. Do you have time to chant your rounds? Do you have time to read Srila Prabhupada's books? Are you able to honor prasadam and follow the principles of devotional service? And then after that, it's kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
My understanding though is that even though that, and through this, the idea, because we are able to, the idea, you have to make sure because that you're able to rise early, chant your rounds, follow the four regulative principles, read Srila Prabhupada's books, meaning that you're able to practice devotional service in an intense way. This is considered intense service, intense, serious devotee. Not intense meaning that they don't do anything else to even maintain themselves or their family. But you have to do that because otherwise these out of varnashram professions are by nature, they're just sinful because they're just vikarma. They don't fall within the varnashram system. And therefore there tends to be vikarmic reactions which tend to disturb our mind, body, society, everything. And devotees also become pulled down by that. And so unless they're able to practice Krishna consciousness, seriously, their consciousness just becomes degraded completely. So this is kind of like my general understanding, although I would like to see if there's any reference to substantiate this general understanding that I have. Is this, you also share this understanding?
What, just like
what I just stated?
Performing vikarmic activities?
Hmm?
The 4 regs, kind of like that?
Well, the 4 regs being completely taboo, and then performing vikarmic occupations only when they allow you to be Krishna conscious.
Yeah.
Or moving to such a kind of a situation.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, it's like, it's an intricate thing. We can explain general things, but each case has to be seen. So it's like, you can speak general things, like don't do this, don't do that, do this, like save time for Krishna consciousness, but each case has to be seen with each individual. So.
Yeah, I mean, good to know if there's any guideline though, because the guidelines, the details are there, but the guideline states the principle.
Yeah. So
So,
I mean, I don't know like specific thing like guidelines like that.
mm.
Anybody else? Srimad-Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Jai.